On July 13th, 1793, in a modest apartment in Paris, a woman knocked on a door. Her name was Charlotte Corday. She was 24 years old, and she was about to commit one of the most consequential murders in history. Inside that apartment, a man sat in a bathtub, his body ravaged by a debilitating skin condition, working tirelessly on the business of revolution. His name was Jean-Paul Marat. He was a journalist, a radical politician, and one of the most feared voices of the French Revolution. Within hours, Marat would be dead, and within months, one of history's most powerful and enigmatic paintings would immortalize that moment forever. The Death of Marat, painted by Jacques-Louis David, is not simply a depiction of a murder. It is propaganda elevated to the realm of high art. It is a political statement disguised as tragedy, and it is, without question, one of the most brilliantly manipulative paintings ever created. To understand this masterpiece, we must first understand the world that produced it. By the summer of 1793, the French Revolution had descended into chaos. The moderate phase of reform had collapsed. King Louis XVI had been guillotined in January. The radical Jacobins, led by Maximilien Robespierre, had seized control of the government. The reign of terror was beginning. Enemies of the revolution, real or imagined, were being arrested and executed by the thousands. France was at war with most of Europe. Civil war raged in the provinces. The revolution was devouring itself. And at the heart of this maelstrom was Jean-Paul Marat. Marat was not a conventional politician. He was a propagandist of genius, a master of inflammatory rhetoric who understood instinctively how to weaponize fear and rage. Through his newspaper, L'Ami du Peuple, the friend of the people, Marat had made himself the voice of the sans-culottes, the radical working-class militants who formed the shock troops of the revolution. He called for blood. He demanded purges. He published lists of suspected counter-revolutionaries and aristocrat sympathizers, effectively marking them for death. To his supporters, Marat was a heroic champion of the people, fearlessly exposing traitors and defending the revolution against its enemies. To his detractors, he was a monster, a demagogue whose words sent innocent people to the guillotine. But by 1793, Marat was also dying. He suffered from a severe dermatological condition, possibly a form of dermatitis herpetiformis or pemphigus, that caused painful, suppurating lesions across his body. The only relief he could find was to sit in a medicinal bath, often for hours at a time. He had transformed his bathtub into a makeshift office, writing articles, receiving visitors, and conducting the business of revolution while soaking in therapeutic waters. It was in this vulnerable state that Charlotte Corday found him. Corday came from a minor noble family in Normandy. She was educated, intelligent, and deeply committed to the more moderate Girondist faction of the revolution, which had recently been purged by Marat's radical Jacobins. Many of her political heroes had been arrested. Some had already been executed. She blamed Marat personally for these deaths. And so she travelled to Paris with a single purpose: assassination. She gained entry to Marat's apartment by claiming she had information about counter-revolutionaries in her home region. Marat, ever the zealous revolutionary, immediately asked her for names. As he leaned forward to write them down, Corday pulled a kitchen knife from her bodice and plunged it into his chest, piercing his lung and severing his aorta. Marat died almost instantly. Within hours, the news spread through Paris. The friend of the people had been murdered. The revolution had lost one of its most powerful voices. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Marat's body was displayed publicly, and thousands filed past to pay respects. The National Convention declared him a martyr to the Republic. And the painter, Jacques-Louis David, who was not only France's greatest living artist, but also a member of the National Convention and a committed Jacobin, was commissioned to create a memorial painting. What David produced in the following months was extraordinary. The Death of Marat is a relatively small canvas, measuring just over 5 feet tall by 4 feet wide, but its impact is monumental. David presents Marat as a secular saint, a revolutionary Christ figure, martyred for the cause of the people. Look at the composition. It's masterfully simple, almost stark. Marat's body occupies the lower half of the canvas, emerging from the green cloth draped over his bathtub. His right arm hangs lifeless over the edge of the tub, still clutching a quill pen. His left hand holds a letter, the letter from Corday that gained her entry to his apartment. The upper half of the painting is pure, empty darkness. This void serves multiple purposes. It creates a sense of solemnity and finality, the darkness of death itself. It focuses all attention on Marat's body, and it removes any distracting details that might undermine the painting's emotional and political message. David has transformed a squalid murder scene into something approaching religious iconography. The visual references to Christian art are unmistakable and entirely intentional. Marat's pose deliberately echoes countless depictions of the dead Christ, particularly Michelangelo's Pietà and Caravaggio's Entombment of Christ. His right arm, hanging limply, mirrors the arm of Christ in these works. The white cloth covering the bathtub functions like a funeral shroud. Even the wound on Marat's chest, barely visible but strategically placed, evokes Christ's stigmata. David is doing something audacious here. He's appropriating the visual language of Christian martyrdom and applying it to a secular, revolutionary hero. In doing so, he's suggesting that Marat's death has the same transcendent significance as Christ's sacrifice. Marat died for the people, just as Christ died for humanity. This was deliberate propaganda designed to sanctify Marat, and by extension, to sanctify the radical revolution he represented. But David's genius extends beyond symbolism. His technical mastery elevates this political statement into genuine art. The lighting is extraordinary. A single light source, coming from the upper left, illuminates Marat's face and torso, while leaving much of the scene in shadow. This creates a powerful sense of three-dimensionality and focuses our attention precisely where David wants it. The light is soft, almost tender, completely unlike the harsh reality of a murder scene. The color palette is restrained and somber. Muted greens, whites, and browns dominate. There is almost no bright color, no visual distraction. Everything serves the painting's emotional tone of dignified tragedy. And the details. David includes just enough specific elements to ground the scene in reality, while carefully editing out anything that might complicate his message. We see Marat's writing materials. The wooden block that served as his makeshift desk, placed across the bathtub, the quill pen, papers, an inkwell. Most significantly, we see 2 letters. The one in Marat's left hand reads, Il suffit que je sois bien malheureuse pour avoir droit à votre bienveillance. It is enough that I am very unhappy to have a right to your kindness. This is supposedly the letter Corday used to gain entry, appealing to Marat's sympathy. On the wooden block, David has inscribed his own dedication. À Marat, David. To Marat, David. This transforms the painting into a personal tribute, a gift from artist to martyr. But notice what's missing. There's no blood pooling in the bathtub, though there must have been copious amounts. There's no sign of Marat's hideous skin condition, which would have covered his body with sores and lesions. There's no indication of the squalid poverty of his actual living conditions. David has beautified Marat, idealized him, transformed him from a sick, violent demagogue into a serene, noble martyr. This is the brilliance and the danger of the painting. It's beautiful, it's moving, and it's a complete fabrication. The real Marat was a complex figure. He genuinely believed in the revolution and in social justice for the poor. But he also helped create the climate of paranoia and violence that led to the terror. His words contributed to the deaths of thousands. He called for summary executions. He advocated for dictatorship. Charlotte Corday, his assassin, was no simple villain either. She saw herself as a tyrannicide, someone who killed a tyrant to save her country from descending further into bloodshed. She faced the guillotine herself, just 4 days after the murder, with remarkable courage and no apparent regret. But David's painting erases this complexity. It presents Marat as pure victim, pure martyr, pure hero. It erases Charlotte Corday entirely, except as the implied evil that caused this tragedy. This is what makes the Death of Marat so fascinating from an art historical perspective. It demonstrates the immense power of images to shape historical memory and political reality. David didn't just paint what happened. He painted what the Jacobin government wanted people to believe had happened. And it worked. For generations, this painting defined how people understood Marat's death and, by extension, how they understood the French Revolution itself. The painting's influence extended far beyond its immediate political context. David had created a new model for depicting contemporary political martyrdom, one that would be imitated countless times in the centuries that followed. Revolutionary movements around the world would adopt similar visual strategies, transforming their fallen heroes into secular saints through carefully crafted imagery. The painting also represents a crucial moment in the history of art itself. David was already the leading exponent of neoclassicism, a style that emphasized clarity, order, and moral seriousness, drawing inspiration from ancient Greek and Roman art. But in the Death of Marat, he pushed beyond mere style into something more psychologically and emotionally complex. The painting's combination of classical restraint and contemporary urgency, its marriage of propaganda and genuine artistry, made it something unprecedented. Today, the Death of Marat hangs in the Royal Museums of Fine Arts of Belgium in Brussels, where it continues to captivate and disturb viewers. We look at it now with very different eyes than David's contemporaries did. We know what came after: the terror, the fall of Robespierre, Napoleon's rise, and the restoration of the monarchy. We know that the revolution's ideals were betrayed and distorted again and again, yet the painting retains its power. Stripped of its original political context, it still functions as a profound meditation on martyrdom, on belief, on the human capacity for both idealism and violence. It reminds us that art is never neutral, that images are weapons, that beauty can be deployed in the service of dangerous ideas. David himself survived the terror, barely. He was imprisoned after Robespierre's fall, but managed to escape execution. He later became Napoleon's court painter adapting his skills to serve a new master, a new regime. He never repudiated the death of Marat, but he also never painted anything quite like it again. The death of Marat stands as a testament to a moment when art, politics, and violence intersected with devastating intensity. It is a masterpiece of manipulation, a work of propaganda so skillfully executed that it transcends its origins and becomes something larger, a meditation on how we create martyrs, how we mythologize violence, and how we use images to give meaning to meaningless death. It reminds us to look carefully at what we're shown and to ask what we're not being shown. It teaches us that the most powerful images are not necessarily the most truthful ones, and it forces us to confront an uncomfortable question. Can something be both a lie and a masterpiece at the same time? The answer, I think, is yes. And that is what makes The Death of Marat one of the most important paintings in history. This has been For Art Thou. If you want to dive deeper into the shadows of history, subscribe. Next time, we go from the bathtub of a martyr to a perilous journey across the ocean. Until then, keep looking closer.